Hi and welcome to this week's 6 tutorial. I'm just going to go through a few settings in Adobe Camera Raw just to help you with processing your images. So what you can see on the screen currently is before and after images. So this is my original and I've provided you with these images, and here's the processed image. Okay, so what we're going to do is take the image from this to this in this session. So selecting on the original image, open it into Adobe Camera Raw, and of course the first step is to do your basic editing, and you should be able to do this really quite easily now. So holding down the Option key, we're going to start with the highlights. Push the highlights across. We're going to bring the shadows down to the left, the whites up to the right, just so don't push it so that it starts to clip and you've got that little gamut warning there, so just bring it back, and the blacks to the left. So once again you've got that gamut warning on, and stop. So there's your first part of the process done in 10 seconds. Always add 10% clarity just as standard. Okay, please don't touch your contrast or the vibrance and saturation, so we're going to deal with that quite soon. The next step is to remap the tonal range in the image. So this is an opportunity to adjust your contrast. That's why I ask you not to adjust the contrast in the first panel. So you've got two opportunities here. So you've got the parametric editing panel as well as the point editing panel. So the parametric curve editor is quite an easy way of tone mapping, and it works well with the targeted adjustment tool with this little tool up here. So if we hover over there, targeted adjustment tool, and but it also, because the language is familiar, so your highlights, lights, darks and shadows, so instead of highlights, whites, darks and blacks, no shadows and blacks, you've got highlights, lights, darks and shadows. So highlights, lights, darks and shadows. How do I know? So if I grab this slider here, pull it to the left, see which part of the curve actually moves. So double click brings it to 0, and the highlights, bring it up, look what part of the curve moves as well. Double click brings it to 0. So you need to adjust the contrast. Digital capture, by its very nature, provides this linear contrast, and so you have to know what we're trying to do is to address the overall contrast in the image. Let me show you before we proceed, let me show you the other one, which is the point editing. So it provides you more accurate tone mapping because it allows you to lock in areas. So control click on an area means it won't move. Okay, so then if I change this, see that highlight doesn't move. I'm just going to zero those off again. Ooh. Excuse me. Bring it back to linear. But what is in point curve, tone curve, which will be really helpful for you, is some presets. So medium contrast will just apply a soft or a medium amount of contrast, or you can apply a strong contrast. So if you use this in the first place, it allows you to see how much and what areas of that curve move for that resulting change in contrast. So if I just bring that back to linear, bring this to parametric, and if we go a little bit in the highlights, a tiny bit in the lights, a little bit in the darks, and a little bit in the shadows, it'll do the same thing. Okay? Or double click on that again, bring it all back to 0. I'm going to get my targeted adjustment tool, and what I want is I want to This area here, I want to lighten that slightly. Okay, and this area here, I want to darken that slightly. So once again, it doesn't matter how you approach this. It does. You've always got that same outcome where we're going to brighten the highlights slightly and darken, no, the shadows slightly, which creates that that illusion of sharpness. So go in here, some medium contrast. Zero these off. So whilst you're starting out, just come in here to point and use your preset contrasts until you learn what no contrast should look like. Okay, so which leads me now, so once I've applied that contrast, I'm now looking at this front wall and thinking it's a little bit dark. So I'm going to go in here to the adjustment brush and I'm just going to add a little bit of exposure. Okay, just zero all those off. How am I going to do that? So here's my brush. The inside dark circle is the hard edge of the brush, and the outside broken line is where the feathering ends. So I'm just going to run that brush down here and to the front there slightly, and then bring the slider up. So can you see how I now can darken or lighten just that one little area of the image? There it is. I just want to add one more little bit, and that's just in here. There it is. Beautiful. I'm happy with that. So that's just my adjustment brush. The adjustment brush allows for localized changes with using any of these settings. So I can add localized color temperature or white balance settings, exposure, contrast. So here's your same settings as before: highlights, shadows, whites and blacks. If I just want to lift the blacks, so I go to new and lift my blacks slightly, and I just want to lift the blacks in there. There it is. It's such an easy tool to use. So how do I get back to my basic editing pane? Just click on zoom and you're back there. The next panel that I'll show you is the detail panel, and this refers to both the sharpening and the noise reduction. So sharpening tool is designed to sharpen by eye at screen zoom, so 100%. So you can either double click on the zoom tool, there it is, and this gives me, actually that's quite good because it gives me some of the brickwork, some of the background, as well as this flat concrete area in the center. When you're thinking about sharpening, if you break your images or your type of images down to two types, so images with high frequency edges, that's with more texture, and thinking about that they need a lower radius, and you have images with low frequency edges, so less texture, so they'll need a higher radius. So what do I mean? So let's have a look at this. So in the sharpening tool you have these four settings: amount, radius, detail and masking. So amount refers to how much or the strength of the sharpening applied to the image, and the Adobe Camera Raw default, if you do nothing else, Adobe Camera Raw is going to apply this amount of sharpening as a default because it knows you have to do some sharpening. The maximum amount of sharpening is 150, so let's go right up to 150. So I don't know if you can see that. I'll just zoom in a little bit more. So at 150 it's sharpening each intersection, each line. So there's nothing worse than an over sharpened image. So with no sharpening applied, that's what the image looks like. With 150%, that's what it looks like. So I'm going to bring it back to the 25% that Adobe Camera Raw thinks that you should have. But we're just going to think this through for a moment. So I've got a couple presets for you just to help you along the line as well. So when you're sharpening scenes, and now this is a scene, so scenes are more a high frequency edge image, okay? So thinking about the amount as a preset could be 40, and the radius, we're going to bring the radius down because we only want to, because remember this is a really textured image, so we don't want to sharpen too far away from each edge because it'll start intersecting with the next edge. So we go 0.8 and the detail at 40, the detail at 35. Okay, so there we are. Before and after, let's have a look at that. Before and after. So can you see how there's this illusion of sharpening? It's just a nice gentle sharpening. I'll just hold down the shift key, move that around. Nice gentle intersect with the sharpening. And the brickwork, the top's before, the bottom's the after. It provides an illusion of sharpness in your image. Okay. Masking, though, no, if you've got elements in the image that you want to protect from the sharpening, then we can apply some masking. So by holding down the Option key and pushing the slider so you can see how it will apply some protection to parts of that image that you don't want the sharpening to that you don't want sharpened, sorry. There's no noise in this image. I'll find a better image a bit later on so we can go through noise reduction with that properly. So I've given you two formulas here: sharpening faces, amount 35, radius at 1.4 and detail 15, with a masking of 60, so that the sharpening is not applied to the pores and the detail in the skin itself. Sharpening scenes is 40, 0.8 and 35 with zero masking. I've applied a little bit of masking because of the flat surface of the behind the scenes there, that big area of fog. So the next panel that we can have a look at is Hue Saturation and Grayscale. So this is an area, and we've visited this panel before when we were converting, when we were processing the infrared images. And I said to you, just pop over here to HSL and Grayscale, check the Grayscale box, which will provide you that monochrome image instead of the bright magenta image, which is a little bit more normal for you to process the infrared. But you don't have to just work with grayscale in this area. You've also got the opportunity to adjust or reassign color in the hue, the saturation of the color, and also the luminance of the color itself. So in the hue, we can change the reds. I'm just going to grab my targeted adjustment tool and zoom up a little bit. So I want to just target this red, and here, as you can see, I can change how that red appears. Okay, I want less red and I want more reds and oranges. So that if you're not sure what color is in your image, the targeted adjustment tool will help you along there. I'm just going to zero that off because that's pretty nasty. I don't work with the hue very much at all, just because I think the sort of images I work with these days are quite natural looking. So once again, using that targeted adjustment tool in this area of the concrete, you can see what colors that we're actually working with. The other thing that you can do obviously is just choose your reds to resaturate, to change the actual hue of the red itself, the color of the color, and 0. So let's have a look at the saturation though. So the saturation refers to how much red is in that, in that color. So if we want less red, or do we want more red? That's how it makes it pop. So here you can play with the saturation in the image itself. But I've got a better trick for you where if you're wanting to make the color pop. If you're working with a color image, jump over here to the luminance panel, because what it's going to do is just work with the brightness, the underlying gamma behind that color. And I can still, look at this, I can still brighten my red, but it's not going to affect the gamut range of, or the reproducibility of that color itself. So here I'm just going to use my targeted adjustment tool. Can you see how that's brightened or made the image more dull? So let's bring that back up again. And in the greens here, I want to brighten those, especially these areas here around the front. But in the background here, let's bring that down. Now have a look at the before and after. Okay, so I'm just going to bring those blues back up again. Way too bright for me. When you convert to grayscale, you can also continue to work in this manner. So if you want to create areas of contrast within the image, once again, you can work with that targeted adjustment tool, and all I'm doing is pushing around the amount of pixels assigned to certain areas of the image, and as a grayscale image it represents, it becomes either lighter or darker as you see it. So this is a wonderful way to create contrast with your image without pushing around the contrast. So that's how it looks without the grayscale over, that's how it looks with the grayscale over. So really the basic editing, the tone and curve, the sharpening and noise reduction, and here the hue, saturation and luminance panel are the three technical areas of your input processing. The rest is just about creativity. It's about you having some fun as well. So I love working with split tone images. And as you remember from last semester, that when we're working with color, or when we're working with color theory, that that cool colors recede and warm colors progress, or so elements that have warm color will progress or move forward in an image. So using this information, on either a color or a black and white image that works perfectly on either, you can enhance and manipulate the viewer's experience. So what I want to do is, in the highlights, I'm going to pick a warm hue. So this is in this red, so reds and yellows area here. And how much saturation do I want? Look at this. Even if I do nothing else, this is a beautiful sepia toned image. But in the shadows, I'm going to just cool that down. So I'm just on the cusp of the blue cyan colors, and how much saturation do I want? There it is. So now I have this warm highlights and cool shadows happening. I can reverse that if I wanted to, so I can have warm shadows and cool highlights. It's up to you. reverse that back again. So you can really play with the viewing experience of an image by working this manner. So I'm just going to go back and unconvert that, and this is what it looks like in color. Just go back to split toning. The highlights. You see how I can manipulate the tone in the color image as well, just in this manner. So go back and hit split, convert to grayscale again, warm highlights, cool shadows. The balance slider here refers to how much of the image that we want the either tones. So how much of the image do we want warm, and how much of the image do we want cool, or do we want it in the center? Double click and it brings it to 0. The next processing panel brings up this lovely grid. So this is about lens corrections. Adobe Camera Raw is incredibly smart, so I can actually check this box and it's going to find my lens that I used anyway, and there it is. Okay, and here I can adjust for any distortion, okay, or vignetting, so any darkening or around the edges created by the lens. There is no distortion or vignetting in this lens. I can, and I'm just going to zoom up quite close in here. Let's hope we can still see this. That's a long way up. I'm just going to turn off the grayscale for a second so you can see this. So around the edge of this building you can see this quite a vibrant cyan line. So this is a chromatic aberration. So if I check this box, remove lateral chromatic aberration, bingo, it's gone. Okay, if that doesn't work, then I'd actually have to if it was a purple or a green hue in the aberration, I'd have to do that manually by changing in here how much of it I want to remove. Okay, just zero that back off again because it's a lovely cyan aberration and it's gone. Go back out again and just check, convert to grayscale again so it doesn't have those horrific colours in there. There's some manual changes or corrections that you can do to your image here as well. So you can apply balance perspective corrections in automatic modes. Okay, so you can apply level corrections, vertical perspective corrections, and level, horizontal and vertical. So these are all automatic settings. Okay, or you can come in here to the manual settings and manually fix up any type of distortion, whether it be lens distortion or vertical or horizontal distortion. So if you've got problems with your capture, in perspective distortion, if you want to scale the image within the frame, there it is, then you can also work with this. You see how, while that's scaled, I'm just going to go to my profile and uncheck that. So can you see how that this has corrected for my lens? Okay, go back to scale. Beautiful. The only other two settings are your camera calibration. So here you can actually choose what version of Adobe Camera Raw you work with, and you can apply some presets. Okay, but the first three provide you with all the technical elements of input processing. The fourth one, Hue Saturation and Grayscales, is the beginning of that creative output process. Okay, split toning. Before we go, let's have a look at the special effects. So dehazing can remove the the appearance of fogginess or smokiness in an image, or it can increase it. There it is. Beautiful. So I'm just going to zero that because I'm quite happy with the amount that's there anyway. But did you see that? When I actually went to 100% dehaze, a couple of spots popped up. So I'm going to go back up and fix them in a second. I can add grain, so I can amount of grain, the size of the grain, and the roughness. So what's grain? Let's zoom in so you can have a look. So sometimes it's nice to create that illusion of being shot with film, and sometimes in a really noisy image, the grain, adding grain will smooth out overall noise or the appearance of noise. Let's go back down to 33%, and I'm going to get rid of those spots. We're up in here somewhere. They're not quite visible, are they? So let's get to my spot removal tool, and I want to visualize those spots. Where are you? And there they are, up in there. So I'm just going to get my clone tool. You can set up your feathering, the size of the tool, the feather, and the opacity, and it's exactly the same as using Photoshop. Option and drag and drag. Okay, and I'm going to show overlay, remove the overlay, unvisualize the spots. No spots left. Thank you very much. So go back to that editing pane and back down again. So there's my final image. I've applied my processing that I want, and I'm happy with it. I'm ready to output. So here we go down to this little hyperlink, and it provides me some more workflow options. So it asks me to choose a color space. So I'm working in ProPhoto RGB. I can be working in Adobe RGB, or I could be working with sRGB. Okay, each one of them will has their different pros and cons. So I'm just going to output as Adobe RGB 1998 at 16-bit channels, and I don't want to resize. Thank you very much. Okay, I don't want to sharpen either, but here I can check this out and check this checkbox, and I can open it in Photoshop as a smart object. I'll just go OK. There's my image. So here's your setup for output, and my save options. Where do I want to save? In the same location or a new location? I'm just going to save in same location, and that's on my desktop. I want to save this as process 2, and I want to save it as a digital negative. There I am. So digital negative process 2, and I can go save. So that was very fast. Now I want to save another copy of this as a JPEG whilst I'm on the run, so I've still got the file up that I've just processed. So I want to save it as a JPEG because I'm going to pop it up onto Facebook and send it to my mum in an email. So now JPEG, it can ask me what size JPEG. I only want a small JPEG, okay? And I can actually limit the file size here as well. I can change, the color space, so I can output this as an sRGB now if I choose to, knowing it's just going to go up onto a screen. But see, because it's a JPEG, I can't change the 8 bits channel to 16. I don't want to resize it, I'm just going to leave it at that size. And I'm going to sharpen for screen. So there it is, and save. So there's my JPEG saving. So now I'm also going to use this image as a base for a composite image where I'm going to add some human figures in there. And so I'm going to save it as a TIFF, okay, and I want to save it into ProPhoto RGB at 16-bit channels, and I want to resize it 150%, so I just want a larger image to start with, but I'm not going to sharpen it for screen. Okay, and save again. Now if I don't want to save the changes to this file, so just hover my cursor here, so if I hit cancel, it's going to cancel out all the changes to this file, and that's fine because I've actually saved a copy of this process file as a DNG. So I can hit cancel. So here I have my original file, my process 2 as a DNG, so command key and select them both, so before and after, my original process file from the other day, a little bit darker, so I've actually lightened that up in that area just a bit more. And then if you have a look at this, there's my JPEG and my TIFF. So as you can see, my original file is absolutely intact, and I've saved all these as copies. So I hope that's helped you a little bit and given you some confidence just to start getting in there and processing. Thank you.